I know the word cause in social psychology is a big one, but before we get into your model, I was wondering if we could have like a kind of an overview of what are potential causes to prejudice itself.
Right. Let's see. So I'd say there's like a few different families, and this is like unofficial, so call this like a taxonomy, that most people believe probably causes prejudice. So this would be the situation in which you're raised, all the experiences you've ever had in your life, call it like socialization processes, but also personality factors. So even two people raised in the exact same environment and exposed to the same stimuli and experiences might have like different levels of prejudice because of some sort of personality dimension. And this is basically like nature versus nurture that I'm talking right now. Psychology can't really measure all that stuff though, so we're really good at measuring like personality characteristics, and I feel like the field has focused a lot of attention on that. We don't really have great measures of like the amount of media that you've been exposed to in your lifetime that might shape your attitudes towards just that group, or I don't know, the conversations you've had with people throughout your life. Those are like harder things for us to measure, even though we all think that they probably play some sort of causal role.
Right. And is it conceivable that what is studied in the lab to kind of isolate these variables, is it a good replication of what people would experience in the not natural world, but like in the outside world?
Maybe. I think the field has focused a lot on this construct of prejudice, and you'll see on my board over there it says, "Is prejudice the point?" This is something I think about a lot. The reason we study prejudice is because it's this attitude that we think is related to behavior out in the real world. But I think there's open questions about whether prejudice, like really I think most people in this space care about differential behaviors to different groups of people. We study prejudice because we can, and we think it applies to this differential behavior, but there's open questions like how strong that link is.
Right. And I was thinking about this, and I don't really know if this is possible, but is there like, are there any biomarkers to prejudice? Obviously, it'd be almost impossible, at least in my estimation, to like really say how heritable is prejudice. But are there any biomarkers to that?
No, not that I know of. I don't know if people have really like looked at it. So people do think there's like personality dispositions that give rise to a more like xenophobic attitude in general. And presumably, if it's like a genetic thing, that maybe there is something under the hood, but nothing that psychologists have identified for sure.
Right. And also, like, I think just to keep in mind, like, a personality factor might not be necessarily linked to like an emotional or a cognitive factor. So there's a lot of convolution in this idea of prejudice. And last question about like kind of defining prejudice. Do we know what emotions are involved in this mental state, I guess?
Yeah, so it's thought, I think the emotion part is kind of like part and parcel of prejudice, meaning having differential liking kind of comes along with a bunch of emotional components, which is why we do certain things in the paper with emotions, but we can talk about that.
Sure.
So there's like Diane Mackey and Smith have done a lot of like intergroup emotions, and kind of like anger and disgust are kind of the ones that are related to like stronger negative feelings between groups. Contempt, which is really just like thought to be roughly a mix between anger and disgust. So those are kind of like the main emotions in that area. But probably, I mean, as we'll discuss in a second, threat is like a major predictor of prejudice in our model, and I guess that would be like anxiety and fear.
Right, but also actual versus perceived threat. There's a distinction, right?
We have them both, but I think like in terms of the person experiencing it, it kind of like translates into the same thing, if that makes sense.
That's very true.